Right, Chad Thomas is a crime expert and he joins us now live to further unpack this. Chad, I mean, when you look at that particular neighborhood where Jade was reporting, it's a quiet neighborhood. To think that not only drugs are being dealt in that particular neighborhood and in that home, but there's also manufacturing that has been ongoing. Just speak to us about just how prevalent this kind of exercise is in the country.
Very good afternoon to you and to the viewers. That raid took place in Amsterdam, which is a suburb of Chatsworth, fairly upmarket area. And it looks as if that was one of the top tier leadership members whose home they raided. And they found evidence of drugs, money counting, as well as perhaps evidence of actual drug manufacture taking place there. But this is, of course, a broader investigation. The Hawks have been working on this for a number of years now with other stakeholders, including the Metropolitan Police Department of Durban, as well as other law enforcement agencies. So this was a multi-pronged, multidisciplinary, interagency takedown that took place today. And it's just showing that our Hawks at the moment are very serious about these type of disruptive and dismantling operations. But like you mentioned, these labs can be anywhere. We've had 5 major raids throughout the country on farms that have housed members of international drug cartels that have been manufacturing methamphetamines. And it can even be right next door where they're pressing out Mandrax tablets, or they're repackaging coke for the local market, or packaging coke and heroin for the international market for transshipment. So it's unfortunately permeated our society at all levels.
And I mean, we have seen how the acting police minister has also been visiting areas outside of KwaZulu-Natal too, you know, like the Western Cape, the Eastern Cape, saying and speaking about the same problem. I want to just stay with KwaZulu-Natal just for a moment. I mean, not too long ago, in fact, just a month ago, you know, we saw how the Provincial Police Commissioner, Nhlanhla Mkhonazi, warned or at least spoke to, you know, citizens who were complaining about some level of rogue police officers operating in the Point area in Durban, saying that they must come out because it was alleged that some police officers were infiltrated in these drug dens that are coming out in that province specifically. I mean, you know a lot about this particular case. Can you give us a sense then in terms of how are the police waging this war against drugs and drug dealers in that province?
We've got a police service that's in excess of 180,000 members, and there are going to be bad apples. And we know that. We see what's coming out of Madlanga. We see what's coming out of Ad Hoc. And last year's July 6th press actually spoke to drug cartels that had infiltrated the police and compromised very senior police officers. So we've got senior police officers as well as junior police officers and all those in between that have been compromised. But it makes up a small percentage of the police as a whole. What we are seeing is a definitive move on the part of the executive together with his cabinet and then, of course, the Commissioner of Police to show that the police are very serious about raids. We saw a raid take place in Gauteng a couple of weeks ago that targeted an international scam call center. We saw a raid over the weekend in Mpumalanga and other provinces that targeted specifically a tender syndicate that had found itself compromising members of staff within the Department of Education in Mpumalanga. And of course, today we're seeing these narcotics raids. It's meant to reassure the public that the police are on top of everything. And to a certain extent, they are. If they weren't on top of everything, we'd be at failed state status. We'd be looking like Mexico is today, but we're not. And we're seeing cooperation on the ground from those that are implicated. And most importantly, we're seeing that crime intelligence is functioning, because these dismantling and disruptive operations cannot take place without crime intelligence initially being the lead agency before handing over the intel to DPCI to run with.
Yeah, you mentioned Mexico. I mean, we've seen those scary scenes for this country not to become another Mexico. I mean, what are some of the interventions that are needed at SAPS level, but also when you look at all the other, you know, criminal justice systems and also law enforcement authorities? We know, you've also mentioned the Madlanga Commission, that for some of these drug dealers to continue to operate, there has to be a level of cooperation from the highest level of echelons of power in terms of cooperation for them to be successful.
Yeah, and that is why we're seeing these interagency task teams doing the takedowns, where they're using resources from other stakeholders such as Metro Police. We see Dog Unit involved, we see Special Task Force involved, and it shows that there is direction in the manner in which this approach is being taken. We have to understand that crime has infiltrated every section of South Africa. It's an economic and societal issue. When it comes to drugs, especially, it causes issues of gangsterism. Petty theft becomes organized crime. We see people that, because of the lack of economic opportunities to create employment, being recruited into gangs, opportunistic criminals being sent to prison, be joining gangs because of the predatory environment. And drugs is a major component in all of this. And it's not just the use of drugs or the sale of drugs and the fighting for turf in South Africa relating to drugs that's the concern. It's that South Africa has become a major transshipment point for drugs such as cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine into other jurisdictions. And we've attracted the interest of foreign cartels. In fact, we now know that the Sinaloa cartel has set up operation in South Africa as well. So we need to nip it in the bud before we reach what we see happening in Mexico, Colombia, and other areas where drugs have become a parallel economy.
In this particular case in KwaZulu-Natal, only one person has been arrested. It's a 3-year investigation, as we've been being told. To what extent does the dismantling of these major drug syndicates, whether you're looking at KwaZulu-Natal or any other province in South Africa, to what extent does that deter those that come into this country and use it as this transit point, as you've been saying?
It's a double-edged sword, because for every leader you take out, a vacuum is created. We've seen that in the Western Cape, where there's turf wars that are ongoing on the Cape Flats. We see a lot of top-tier leadership currently on trial in the Western Cape for inter alia drug trafficking, extortion, protection, murder for hire. And it creates the situation where other people want to move into those positions. 2 major drug dealers from gangs in the Cape were actually murdered and found in the Vaal River, and it then later transpired that they'd been killed on instruction by the Sinaloa cartel, because a drug shipment that had come into South Africa that was meant to then leave our shores repackaged didn't actually get declared by them, and they claimed it had been lost at sea. So the Sinaloa cartel came to South Africa and made an example of 2 very senior gang leaders from the Western Cape. So we're on a precipice at the moment, and it's, like I said, it's a double-edged sword. You can take out the leadership, but there's always people that are willing to come back in. So what we need to show is that there is consequence and accountability for these serious crimes. We can't just charge people for being in possession of drugs or dealing in drugs. They have to be charged in terms of the Prevention of Organised Crime Act for racketeering. So one person arrested today may lead to further arrests, but we need to see the NPA now getting involved, and the NPA insisting on a racketeering certificate being issued, because the consequences in terms of sentencing are a lot higher. And of course, if you start taking away the assets from them and their family that are the proceeds of the crime through the asset forfeiture unit, it starts making it less attractive for these drug dealers to keep South Africa as a base of their operations.
And just, looking again at those visuals and how one presumes that is a safe neighborhood, in terms of, community members who may be aware of some form of activity, and without obviously having to risk their lives, what are some of the steps you think they can take to report such cases of a known syndicate that operates in a neighborhood like the one that we've been seeing, manufacturing drugs?
It's such a difficult question that we've seen raids take place in upmarket estates, both in KwaZulu-Natal and other provinces. In Gauteng, a group of Israeli assassins and organized crime members were taken down in a raid. They had weapons, they had a whole lot of equipment. They'd even created a truck as a sniper's nest. The neighbors didn't know this was happening. We saw a raid take place in Zimbabwe of some CIT members a couple of months back. The neighbors didn't know what these people were doing. So if you do have neighbors and you do have community policing forums, community watchers, block watchers, and they do know their area and they take an interest in their area, they should be reporting this through to the defined structures. The CPF being a very important structure within all police stations, of course, police management itself. But a lot of people don't want to get involved. They're nervous for their safety, for the safety of their families. And in a lot of instances, they're scared that the information they give somehow finds its way back to the syndicates, and they are then targeted for being the whistleblowers. So it's a tough situation. But of course, we need to restore that faith in our police system, in other platforms and structures like CPFs, so that people do take the initiative and they do keep the police and the CPFs abreast of anything suspicious in their areas.
All right, Chad, thank you so much for your analysis and, of course, your reaction. Really do appreciate it. A concerning topic, this. That is, of course, Chad Thomas, a crime expert, joining us to unpack that latest police raid in KwaZulu-Natal.